Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Matt Rosu, Dean of the Sigmund Weiss School of Business at Susquehanna University, and thrilled to have Brian O'Rourke with us today to discuss a little bit about what we can learn from superheroes about economics. So what can superheroes teach us? Do a brief bio of Brian, and then I'll have a longer one in the description for you. But Brian O'Rourke's a university professor of economics at Robert Morris University, where he's won several awards for teaching innovation. I got to know Brian by going to some economics pedagogy conferences several years ago, and I've attended a conference hosted at Robert Morris on economics before. And I've learned a lot from Brian on how to teach. And part of it is how to use pop culture, how to use music, how to use superheroes to relate complex topics to students. So a couple books that Brian has published, Essentials of Economics, published by W.W. Norton. Is that on edition 2 now or 3?
It's on 2, yeah.
On edition 2. 3 will come soon enough, I'm sure.
Yes, it will.
And why Superman doesn't take over the world, what superheroes can tell us about economics, published by Oxford University. And Superheroes in Economics, the shadowy world of capes, masks, and invisible hands, published by Routledge. There's more. You can read the bio for more. Today, we're excited. Brian, thanks for being here. And we were excited to learn a little bit more about what superheroes can teach us.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Love being here and love talking with you about all things economics and pop culture.
That's fun. It's fun stuff. So first question, we've kind of guided this in framing interesting questions that superheroes might face or questions you might have about superheroes. So question number 1, why does Clark Kent get a job?
Yeah, that's one of the the weird things. If you think about, you read comics and you watch the movies, and you've got all these people who develop or are bestowed with these abilities, these superpowers, and they still have to somehow come up with a way to pay the rent. So Clark's in Metropolis. It's an expensive place to live. You got Barry Allen, who is the Flash. You've got Green Lantern, or Hal Jordan. He's the Green Lantern. You've even got Wonder Woman, it's Diana Prince. And you've got all these characters who have these alter egos. They go to work every day. And you have to ask yourself, why not just make a living as a superhero? Surely you could charge someone for your superhero services, or, just imagine.
You could set up a Venmo.
Oh yeah, totally. Venmo would be awesome. Or, could you imagine what the Yankees would pay to have, Superman batting cleanup? It would, wouldn't make the games much fun for anybody else, but, he could make a, sizable fortune using his superpowers, but they don't do that. And one of the reasons I think that is because when superheroes provide a service, we're going to save the planet from some alien invasion, or we're going to stop some, this criminal syndicate. What they're really doing is they're providing public goods. And as we study economics, we study the concept of a public good. Public good is one of those things where people can't, the provider of the public good can't charge someone for the public good. And so there's no way to capture any kind of revenue from the saving of the world. It's, what's Superman going to do? He's not going to hold out for, and negotiate a price while the alien invasion is going on. And the only chance he has really to charge someone is to wait till after the invasion is over. And by that time, the service has been provided. And who's going to pay for the service in the right mind? Superman could always say, well, I won't save you the next time. But the problem with that is that Superman always will save you the next time. That's what superheroes do. So, you still have to pay rent. Maybe someone would donate a nice schwanky apartment, but again, that's also kind of the public goods question. Why would you pay these people to do what they're going to do anyway? So they go out and get a job so they can afford, in Superman's case, and maybe a new suit. In the Flash's case, he's taken Iris out to dinner. He's still got to pay for dinner. So the provision of the public good is what necessitates these superheroes getting a job. Because, unless you're like Bruce Wayne or Tony Stark, who is already fabulously independently wealthy, you've got to go you got to go get a job, and preferably something that gives you some flexibility. Right. So
Sure.
I've got to leave at a moment's notice because there is this alien invasion. And so, as a journalist, as a crime scene investigator, you have a little bit more flexibility in those kind of jobs.
It is interesting. I mean, there are people, public goods are underprovided. And if for the listeners who may not be aware of the economics definition of a public good, it doesn't mean something that's necessarily good for the public, but has a couple key attributes. One, if more people benefit from the public good, the quality doesn't drop. So if you save the world, it doesn't matter if there's 1 billion or 6 billion people, right? There's no decrease in quality to the billion and first person who's around. So quality one is non-rival, and second, you can't exclude people. So if you're saving the world, and Superman's is thinking, well, these people didn't want to pay, can't just not save part of the world. And when that happens, it's known as a market failure. People, it would tend to be underprovided. A couple examples, classic examples are military defense and clean air that go, I bring up in economics classes. I don't know what your examples are.
Yeah, military is such an easy one, and it kind of covers the people who are in favor of the military. It covers the people who are not in favor necessarily of the military, because they understand, we do need something to protect us from the evil forces out there.
But it would be, fascinating taking this a little further, right? When the original superhero comics were created, there wasn't Venmo, there wasn't Instagram, there wasn't, I would be kind of, there wasn't the internet. It would be, I'd love to see a series come out where, Superman becomes, what, an influencer? That's the term that gets used.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because, the comics do have to change a little bit. They can't just keep everybody working in newsprint, because, your readers are like, what the heck's a newspaper? If you have younger readers. And so there have been some changes in the workforce. So at one point, Superman becomes a TV anchor. They're going to take him out of the newsroom and we're going to put you on TV. And he's actually quite good at it. Of course, he's Superman. He's pretty good at a lot of things.
Yeah.
Some of the more minor characters in some of the comics, J. Jonah Jameson, for example, in the Spider-Man comic, he kind of leaves the newspaper world and gets into blogging and gets into the internet, kind of, not, I wouldn't say influencer, but kind of like the National Enquirer types of rags that you see at the newsstand. He's not in the print media, no, he's doing all this online. But there are some changes over time. But we kind of get used to Superman being at the newspaper. But if there isn't a newspaper, how much longer can he do that?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Second kind of superhero themed question. So Joker always tries to defeat Batman, never wins. Why does Joker keep trying?
Well, I think the easy answer to that question is that most villains or most heroes don't seem to believe in capital punishment. So there's only one instance of a super villain being executed in the comics. And so if you go back to Superman, the original Superman in 1938, there's one execution, and it's in the Shazam comic. The character is Mr. Mind, and Mr. Mind is literally a worm. So it's not like we're killing a person. Off panel, Mr. Mind is electrocuted, and the world is now safe from this super evil genius worm. But every other villain ends up going to prison, and they build these super max prisons for all of these villains, and some of them are you scratch your head. Rikers Island is one of the prisons in Marvel. That's like Rikers Island is, if people don't know this is an actual prison in New York that is, I think, decrepit would be the best way to describe it. the building is not well kept, the food is horrible, there's mass hysteria at this place all the time. But if you're putting supervillains into Rikers, they're not going to be there very long. There are other prisons that are fortresses out in the middle of the ocean that seem to be more effective at keeping supervillains under control. But almost regardless of where you send them, the villains are getting out fairly easily. And that poses a problem for the incentive, or the negative incentive in this case, to, if you commit a crime, we're going to put you in prison. And that may be not very effective if you can get out of the prison very easily. You may just hang out of prison for a week. You get 3 square meals a day, and you get a nice, you get a bed, roof over your head, and then you get bored, and then you break out. So there's this huge problem that we create in the super villain world of what's known as a moral hazard problem, where when you take away the consequences of an action, then people engage in a behavior more frequently. And I think that's kind of the issue with villains. Why do they keep trying? They keep trying because there's no real negative consequences to them. A week in prison, or even a month in prison, is more a slap on the wrist than anything else.
That's fascinating. I had not thought about it in that particular way before. And thinking about it, you're a parent, I'm a parent. It's kind of, economists as parents are always interesting, because thinking about what is the proper incentive structure on various things. I mean, maybe we're not saying that, but often thinking about it more. But I mean, when you said you're sent away, but you get out, it reminds me of, like, don't do this, or 5 minutes from now, I'm going to tell you not to do it again. Right?
Oh, yeah.
The various lines on what are the proper incentives to, any incentives. I mean, if they don't believe in capital punishment, I don't see any way around this problem. Although I guess that means that the comic book writers perpetually have more stories.
Sure. And there are some villains who fade off into the sunset because they're not interesting. But with Joker, or Mr. Freeze, or you fill in your favorite supervillain, Harley Quinn, Cheetah. We do want to read about them again. They're a character, that they're the bad character, but they're still interesting. So you develop an interesting supervillain. You don't want to get rid of them too quickly. That you can have your own storyline with those characters.
Absolutely. So you mentioned like Harley Quinn, and I know in like the recent movie, there's the team that she's on. Why do superheroes choose to team up?
Well, some of them, interestingly, you can go back again. I'll start with very early in comic history. Batman comes along in 1939, so he's really early. Superman's the first one. Batman comes along soon after, and Batman's sales start to lag pretty quickly. It's kind of surprising now. Batman's this he's on this Mount Rushmore of superheroes.
Sure.
So what DC did to kind of stimulate interest was they created Robin. They thought, well, if there was this character that the readers could identify more closely with, maybe this will help sales. So Robin, if I remember correctly, Robin comes along in like 1940. He's very, very early in the Batman canon. And so you've got the dynamic duo. You've got Batman and Robin, and pretty much from 1940 onward, Batman and Robin are found together with remarkable regularity. Superman, on the other hand, there are characters kind of in the periphery around Superman. There's a Superboy, there's a Supergirl, there's a Superwoman, there's a Super Dog. If one of the movies was out. I don't know that it's still in the theaters, but it was about super pets. And so there's Crypto the Super Dog. So you've got this kind of grouping around Superman, but none of them ever really stick as a sidekick to Superman. Even when you have a big team up of superheroes like the Justice League, Superman's there, but he kind of stays in the background just a little bit. It's almost as if he's like, I could take care of this all on my own, but I want these other people to feel like they're doing something valuable. Some superheroes have just what we call an absolute advantage in economics, where they can do everything better than everybody, and they do it in a lower cost. or at a lower cost. So Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern has the Green Lantern Corps, but those two in particular there's an attempt to pair them with someone. Thor would be another one. You attempt to pair them with a sidekick, but it just doesn't work very well because these particular heroes have so much power. But everybody else at some point seems to be in a team at some level. Some of the teams are weird. There's a Green Arrow Aquaman team up that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but they accomplish the mission. You have Batman and Robin, you have the Avengers. And when you have those teams, what those superheroes are doing is they're taking advantage of what in economics we call comparative advantage, where we have these abilities that people have to accomplish a task in a lower cost way than other people. And as a result of that, those teams get far more done. It's sort of like the sum of the whole, or the sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the individuals. So heroes, even though they have all these great abilities, most of them can't do it all. They have specializations. And so by taking advantage of that specialization, the team is far more productive and is able to, in the case of the Avengers, they're able to defeat Thanos because they're a team. If they tried to do it individually, instead of working as a team, we would all be gone. Thanos would rule the world.
Yeah.
And all that bad stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I was talking to a CEO the other day, actually, who was saying, look, as a CEO, a lot of the people who are, reporting to you've been in the role and you could do the stuff they do really well, but that's not the advantage. That's not the advantage. There's one CEO, whereas you may have, then you already have a chief marketing officer or a chief financial officer, and you need to let them do their job. Stay away, and kind of the gains from specialization very well translates to the real world as well. Final question I'll ask. We talked a little bit about why superheroes team up. Why would superheroes choose to fight each other?
So this is a little bit, that question comes up pretty much whenever you watch any kind of superhero movie at some point. So my wife and I were sitting on a couch watching TV, and a trailer for the movie Batman versus Superman, or Superman versus Batman, however they titled it, came up, and she asked me, I thought these guys were friends. Why do they fight each other? And it's a good question. You would expect the good guys to try to be examples for all the kids out there, and don't fight each other, talk out your differences. And it's interesting how this is a trope in comics that's used over and over and over again. Superman fights Wonder Woman, Superman fights Batman, people in the Avengers fight each other. There are all of these instances where the good guys are at odds with each other, and they choose to slug it out as opposed to talk it out. I think the best explanation for that, and again, it's a little bit more complicated, but there is something that we talk about in economics called game theory. And game theory helps us to understand strategic interactions between people. And sometimes some games end up in what we call a prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma is a game where the outcome of the game is suboptimal. In other words, it's an outcome with the lowest payoff as opposed to the biggest payoff. And because of the way the game is structured, you end up with the players choosing an outcome that is actually not good for either of the combined payoff of either of the players. And I think that's what we end up with in superhero fights. There are payoffs for talking it out, and there are payoffs for fighting. And then if you talk it out, the payoffs would be bigger. If you fight, the payoffs would be smaller, but similar to having two prisoners in a separate cells, if they keep quiet, they're going to have a lower prison sentence, but instead they both spill their guts and they end up in jail for a longer period of time. We see the same kind of mechanism happen for superheroes when they decide to fight each other.
Yeah, they each have the individual incentive to fight. Whether the other person wants to or not, they're individuals better, but when they both fight, they're both worse off.
Yep. And, oftentimes, at least in the comics, the fights are masquerades to try to trick some bad guy into giving up or whatever. But sometimes the fights are legitimate. And, the Superman Batman battle in the comics is, it's pretty fierce and gruesome. It's in Frank Miller's work, The Dark Knight, where they have this. That's kind of where the movie version of the fight originates. And I mean, they're not pulling any punches, these two guys. And there's a good reason why they kind of come to loggerheads. It has to do with government oversight and whatnot, which is the same story in the Avengers movies, where they're fighting over whether they should succumb to the Sokovia Accords, to have basically the United Nations govern the Avengers. And one group says yes and one group says no, and they can't reach an agreement.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. And thank you for your insights today. So for those who want to learn more about superheroes, I assume is the best place to buy your books through Amazon? Or,
Amazon. Yeah, that's the easiest place to get it. You can get it through Oxford, but shipping from England is atrocious.
A little bit tougher. Yeah. We'll include we'll have links to the books in the description for those who would like to check out and learn a little bit more about what we can learn about economics from superheroes. Brian, thanks for being with us. Any closing words or comments?
Just one. I would just say that people think about economics and superheroes as not. You've got these really stodgy. Here we are, stodgy. Economists talking about very serious things, and comics are just stories for kids. But as economists, we like to say that economics is everywhere.
Yep.
And it shows up in the weirdest places sometimes. It shows up in the music we listen to. It shows up in the movies we watch. It shows up in the stories that we read. And if you don't have some sort of economic tether to most of this stuff, especially fantasy, the stories will fall apart pretty quickly. It's amazing. So if you know where to look and you know what to look for, it's interesting to see how economics shows up in these unusual places.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brian. Really appreciate your time today. And thank you to everybody for watching. We'll see you in the next video.